Tonight, B'ezrat Hashem, the class is Leilui Nishmat Michael ben Sarah. The Torah that we learn and the mitzvot that come out of it should be an aliyat neshama for him. Tiyeh menuchato eden im kol tzadikim. Amen. Two guys are standing on the street, and they're both watching the same thing. One guy sees a Krispy Kreme donut truck racing down the street and a bunch of cops chasing after him. And another guy sees the same thing. To one it's funny, and to the other it's sad. And the only difference to the two is one knows the story and the other one doesn't. To one, these are two officers that are trying to track down a guy to get him to sell him some donuts on their lunch break. And to the other guy, they know that this guy was just in a hit-and-run accident, injuring children on the side of the street, and the cops are trying to stop him to bring him to justice. What's the difference between the two as they stand on the side and observe, and one is laughing and one is crying? One heard the whole story, and one just sees something, and to him his imagination makes him hear a completely different situation. This concept the Torah teaches us in our parasha. Vayishma Yitro Kohen Midyan Choten Moshe. Yitro, Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law, was no Rosh Kibahag. He wasn't the chief rabbi of Israel. He wasn't any famous tzaddik. He wasn't a celebrity in the yeshiva. He actually never went to a yeshiva. The Chachamim teach us he was an idol worshipper. Not only was he an idol worshipper, there was no idol that he didn't worship. He tried them all. Some people change gods like they change socks. He was one of them. And he was the Kohen Midyan, the head of it all. He led the Avodah Zarah movement. But he still merited to be Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law. And later on, to have a parasha in the Torah named after him. Netzach, for eternity. He had a parasha in the Torah named after him. We say the word Yitro, we get a mitzvah, Talmud Torah. It's a word in the Torah. And how did he do it? The Torah says in one word, Vayishma, because he heard. So Rashi, this is one of the more famous Rashis in the Torah because of all the commentary said about it. Says, Ma shmua shama uba. What did he hear? So Rashi writes, he heard Kriyat Yam Suf u'milchemet Amalek. He heard the story about two miracles. Kriyat Yam Suf, the splitting of the ocean, and Milchemet Amalek, the war that Am Yisrael had against Amalek, that they won in a way that's not a natural way of winning a war. V'haya ka'asher yari Moshe et yado v'gavar Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu lifted his hands up, and boom, Israel wins the battle. What is this Rashi really saying? What Rashi is saying is something very deep. These two incidents that Yitro heard were the headlines of the news. Everybody heard it. It goes so far that the Chamim teach us by Kriyat Yam Suf, part of the miracle was not only did the water of the Yam Suf split in half, but all the water in the whole world split in half. If you were in the middle of drinking a coffee, suddenly went down on the two sides because the middle split. Any liquid in the whole world split. So everybody knew something's going on. Everybody knew something's going on. We say in Az Yashir, Shamu Amim Yirgazun. They were scared. They thought this was the end of the world. Az Nivalu Alufei Edom Ele Moav Yochazemu Rad. They were trembling. Rad, tremble. Namogu kol yoshvei Canaan. Namogu, in one of its explanations, can mean to melt. They melted from fear. Meaning the whole world knew this. This wasn't a secret. This made the headlines in the best way. They didn't need Twitter and they didn't need anything else, Instagram or Facebook to publicize the miracle. Everybody witnessed it live. It happened to them in their own house. So Rashi says, wait a second. Everybody heard. They all heard the same thing. And the Torah takes one person out of everybody and says, "Vayishma Yitro." Yitro heard the stories. Comes Rashi and says, "Mashmua shama uba." What did he hear different than everybody else? Everybody heard it. What's he different? And over here, the Torah teaches us the greatest lesson that we could possibly learn in life. That we all see things every day. We all read things every day. We all hear things every day. The question is, what are we really hearing? A lot of times, you could hear something, but you heard nothing, because what you heard didn't go in, it didn't penetrate. For example, the Gemara teaches us every single day, a bat kol, a voice from heaven, comes out and says, Shuvu banim shovavim. Jewish kids, do teshuvah. Am Yisrael, do teshuvah. We heard this bat kol today, but we didn't really hear it, because none of us remember hearing it. Why? Because we're not on the level of Vayishma Yitro. In our process of hearing, there is something that's lacking. We're missing a piece. And this is the great pride of the Torah, that the Torah teaches us that Yitro gets a parasha named after him, because when he heard, he really heard. One of my favorite stories that actually came about from very sad circumstances is in World War I, when many Jews had to run away from their homes out of fear of different things that were going on against the Jewish people then. Many of the people from Krakow in Poland left their homes, left everything behind and ran away, and they went to Vienna, which was a safer place to be at that point. And the first time it really hit them, the fact that they went away, was when a holiday is the time that you feel the difference most. That's when you're home, and that's when you feel the environment the most. And on the holiday of Chanukah, which was their first holiday after running away from their hometown, they were sitting in the synagogue, and on one hand they were celebrating the miracle of Hashmonaim, but on the other hand they were feeling very lonely and very betrayed by society. They had to leave their houses, their families, everything behind just to come to a safe place. And the rabbi of Vienna, the chief rabbi, spoke one morning during the days of Chanukah. And he asked a question. He said, during the days of the Hashmonaim, we also had issues with the Greeks. And the Hashmonaim came, and they fought the battle, and they took care of it for us. So where's our Hashmonaim today? Where's the Hashmonaim in World War I? Why can't this thing be resolved? And he kind of left it in a semi-question mark. But he did say this: the closest thing to Hashmonaim that we have today is our children that go to Talmudei Torah and Yeshivot, that study the Holy Torah, pure kids, Tinokot Shovet Rabban. Their Torah protects us. They're our Hashmonaim of the day, of the time. But then the rabbi said, Baruch Hashem, our boys have Yeshivot to go to. And therefore they're able to study Torah, and they get a good education, and they'll be the future of the Jewish nation. But our girls have no schools to go to, and they have to go to public school as a result. And they're raised between the Goyim, and they don't get an education in Torah. So we have the Hashmonaim on the male side, but we don't have the Hashmonaiyot, I guess we would call it, on the female side. And this was his talk. And it was kind of a talk with a prayer that situation should change. There were many people in the room that day who heard that great speech of the chief rabbi of Vienna. And everybody walked out and said, wow, what a good speech the rabbi gave. But that's where it ended. But there was one woman who was sitting there in the room, who to her the rabbi's words weren't just wow. They actually meant something. And her name was Sarah Schneer. And she went out and started building one Beit Yaakov after the next. And until today, every Jewish girl that goes to a Jewish school is just elevating her soul in Olam Haba, because it was all her mission. And it was all what she founded. Mashmu'a shama'u ba. Everybody heard. But the Sarah Schneer, there was a reason, this was a call for action, a call for duty. She internalized what she heard. To everybody else, we heard a nice speech, let's go on, beautiful. That's what the Torah is teaching us over here. The result of what you hear shows if you really heard, or was just lip service of the rabbi and polite people smiling, nodding their heads, yeah. You know, in life they say you hear what you want to hear. In the medical world they call it selective hearing. Children are very good at that. Very good at that. You know, they pick out of what their mother says exactly the phrasing that they liked, and then the rest didn't never happen. For some reason, when I tell my kids, if I try to bribe them to go to bed without turning the house over first, I tell them go to bed nicely without giving us a hard time, and tomorrow take candy to school or whatever you want. So they hear, go take candy. They don't hear the rest, and within 30 seconds they're in the candy cabinet. And you see them, it's 11 o'clock at night, there's a feast. So what's going on here? Dad, you just told us to go take candy. Selective hearing, that's what kids do. Us as adults, we also do it, but in a different way, and we cover up our tracks better. But at the end of the day, we're all in the same boat. There's a famous, I don't know if it's a story or a tale, you know, certain ones I know are true, this one I don't. But the message is so clear either way. Of a guy who had a son, who the years were going by and he wasn't getting married. Because the kid wasn't the best kid, to say the least, and he had a lot of issues, and no girl wanted to deal with that. And he goes from, 20 to 25, 30, 35, 40, the years are going by. And the father keeps on trying to find somebody, anybody, just get him married. Always interested. Finally, he hears about some girl that has superb midot and is not that young and is willing to compromise and this and that. Now she's not going to go out with a crazy guy, but if it's marketed the right way, there's a chance. So he goes to one of this guy's acquaintances and he tells him like this, my son has to get married. I'm asking you for a favor. I'm going to give you as a reference for the shidduch. And when they call you up, you tell them only 2 words. Don't elaborate, because if you'll elaborate, by default, you'll say what a majnun my son is. Keep it limited what you say. Just say 2 words in Hebrew. Akol beseder. Everything's good. And hopefully the girl will agree to go out with him, and maybe some miracle will happen and they get married. This guy said, okay, I'll do my best. Al pi halacha, it's a big sin to do such a thing. I'm not joking, a big sin. You're not allowed to cover up for somebody and to get him married. Then what's his wife going to do with him a day after the wedding? He gets a phone call on the other end of the line. Somebody says, hello, yeah, you're his friend? He says, I'm his acquaintance, yeah. What do you have to say about him? Now he was going to say, Akol beseder. But in his head and subconsciously, he knew how messed up this guy is, that when he came to say Hakol beseder, everything's okay, he said Hakol lo beseder. Everything's not okay. The guy says thank you very much, hangs up the phone, and this guy realizes what he did and he feels so bad. He's like, oh my God, what did I just do? This is a tragedy. But alright, done deal, what are you going to do? Sure enough, 2 weeks later, he hears that the boy got engaged to the girl. He said, how could it be? I didn't even cover up. I didn't do anything wrong. He goes to the engagement party because he's curious what's going on over here, what type of girl. First he thought maybe she's blind, deaf, dumb. Even that maybe wouldn't be enough for such a guy. Sometimes people tell me, Rabbi, I have a son, he's a diamond, find him a shidduch. I say, first of all, I'm not a shatchan. Second of all, your diamond's so big it doesn't fit into my safe. I'd rather a cubic zirconia over your diamond. Go send a kid for help and then we'll get him married. He walks into the engagement and the father of the girl comes running to him. He was already scared. The guy says, thank you so much. Your zechut, the shidduch came out. Unbelievable. This is the best that could be in the world. So he looks at the guy and he says, sir, I'm sorry, but I got to ask you something. So what? He said, you called me up. He asked me information. And I didn't give the best information. So why is it because of me? If anything, because of me, it shouldn't be. he said, what do you mean? I called you up to ask you what the story of the guy is. I don't have time to waste with details. And you said in 1 minute all his problems. What you said is, Hakol lo beseder. Now, kol in Hebrew could mean everything, or with a kuf it could mean voice. He has a problem with his voice. I said, that's the whole problem of a boy? He's a good boy for my daughter. Have a good life. Mashmua shamahu ba. What did this guy hear? What did this guy say? What did this guy hear? It's called selective hearing. He chose what he wanted to hear. And even the greatest thing like that, doctors a lot of times also tell me, sometimes they have to break a person the news, they're sick. Different people respond in different ways. Many people respond in denial, but you can't deny when somebody comes to you and shows you a CT with something wrong with it. So they start hearing things that the doctor never said. The guy's telling him he has one thing, they heard something else. Guy could have a serious sickness that he has to treat, but he doesn't want to deal with it, so he heard the doctor say that he has a stomach ache. The doctor said you have a tumor, you got to go remove it. He didn't hear that. He heard something else. That's why we don't hear the bat kol, because we have selective hearing. It's not convenient every morning to hear God saying Shuvu Banim Shovavim. Nobody likes being called a shovav. And nobody likes hearing every day that he has to do teshuvah. So it's a lot more convenient not to hear it. It's selective hearing. Yeah, if we were already on the subject of shidduchim, sometimes people think that they could freely say whatever they want. And because they calculate what the other person wants to hear, and they feed into what the other person wants to hear. Al pi halacha, that's not permitted. The lashon hara aspect, I'm not a specialist in. You ask your local rabbi. But on the flip side, not always what you think the other person wants to hear is really what the other person wants to hear. I remember when I was in yeshiva in Lakewood, so we had a phone in the room, and people would call one of the roommates, to ask about another roommate, information, what's the story of the guy. So one of the roommates in the room was a guy whose aspirations was to be anything but a Talmid Chacham. And there's nothing wrong with that. He wanted to make money. That was his thing, Everybody has this thing in life. And he always said that he only wants to marry a girl that, to her, the only thing in life that's important is money, so she should let him work and make money, and money, and that's it. One day, the phone rings in the room, and on the other end of the line, one of my friends picks up. There's a big famous Rosh Shiva, and he's calling for information about this boy. And the assumption was that he was calling for his daughter, which turned out to be true. And the guy who picked up the phone said to himself, if I'm going to tell the Rosh Shiva, this guy, Torah, doesn't interest him, the only thing that interests him is Benjamin Franklin, then it's not going to work. And I don't want to be the bad guy to mess it up. If he's calling, that means his daughter's interested in the guy. Why should I be the bad guy? So he tells the rabbi on the phone without thinking twice. Rabbi, he's such a good boy, he's unbelievable. Now that we're in the room, he's not even here. He's probably studying. What studying? He was working a second night job or something then. He's probably studying. He's such a good boy, he's unbelievable. And the rabbi continues asking me, prays with him in Yan every day, 3 times, serious. Yeah, he never misses. Never misses his pillow, he meant to say. He does this, and he gives a report on him as if Gedol Hador. And at the end of the conversation, the Rosh Shiva sighs, and he says, He said, what? He said, I thought it was for my daughter, but I guess not. So the boy is shocked, and he says, Rabbi, why not? He's such a good boy, I'm telling you. He says, yeah, but my daughter, she's not on these levels. She came out much different than our family, and she's much less religious. And she needs a boy who's more money-oriented, and more this, and more that. If he's always learning and praying, it's not going to work. And he hangs up the phone. What was the guy going to do then? Say, Rabbi, I lied to you? He's the perfect guy? You see, Borei Olam has a plan. Don't run his world for him. Let him run his world for himself. You don't have to run the world for God. He can do his job well. But when it comes to you, for yourself, for your own personal things, make sure you hear the message in a clear way. I think it was at the end of the 60s, maybe the beginning of the 70s. One of the ministers in the Britain Parliament came on a visit to the United States for political reasons. And he came to New York. And he landed on his private jet And there were tons of news reporters right when he landed, right? He's coming, a famous guy coming to New York. It was a whole big deal. And it was in the evening. And he was a nice guy, polite guy. He answered reporters' questions, even though he could have told them goodbye. And one of the reporters asked him, "Sir, it's already late. Are we holding you up? Don't you want to go to your hotel?" So he answered him back, "I'm young in spirit." Which he meant to tell him, big deal, you know. And a minute later, the guy turns to him again with his next thing. And he says, "If you're young in spirit, how are you going to spend your night?" And only a British politician would answer it, or a regular politician would have walked away in 1 second. He looks at him, and with, a lame British humor, I hope there are no Brits in the room, he says to him, "What, there are no nightclubs in New York City?" And that was the end of the conversation. The next morning, the headline in every New York paper was, "Mr. So-and-so, I forget his name, said there are no nightclubs in New York City." They needed an item for the news. So they took his words and they just took off the question mark. And they left the rest. They heard the part that they wanted to hear, and the part that wasn't convenient for them they didn't hear. And now we have an item, headlines in the news. And this is the story of life at every step of life. You hear this, you don't hear that, you hear it. Sometimes you have such warning signs in front of your face that a situation is not good for you. And you go right into it anyway. Why? Because you blinded yourself to everything because it wasn't convenient to hear it at that point. People work in companies. The company's about to close down, and they're still convinced that somehow they're coming out of bankruptcy. Hello, go look for another job. You see your company's falling apart. But no, they don't hear that part. They'll hear everything else. My boss is a nice guy, this, that. But the main thing that they have to hear, that it's time to look for a new job, that suddenly they're not hearing. About 350 or so years ago, lived a great man. His name was Rabbeinu David Segal. He wrote a commentary in Halakha called the Taz. We use it all the time, right? The Bach and the Taz we use every day almost. And at a certain point during the Gzerot, the Tach and Tat, that was a terrible period in the Jewish nation. Over the course of 2 years, there were hundreds of Jewish communities that were destroyed under great persecution, and over 500,000 Jews that were killed. Very, very tragic time. So most Jews found themselves being the literal wandering Jew, going from place to place, looking for how to survive. And the Taz, this great rabbi with his wife, was one of those people who was going from place to place. He was staying alive from what he found on the roads and from what people gave him. After a few weeks of doing this, he told his wife like this. On one hand, our situation is very painful and tragic, because this is not a way to live. But on the other hand, there is one element in our situation that I think is a great thing. So his wife says, "What could be great in this horror?" So he says, "Until now, I was a famous rabbi. Everybody knew me. So I never had time to study. People made me crazy all day with questions, with community issues, with this, with that. I had to go to events. I was famous. Now, thank God, nobody knows me. I'm in foreign cities. We don't stay in any place for more than a few nights because we don't have where to be. So I have peace. So I can learn. And I can grow. And I feel that my spiritual growth is so much greater in these days, these hard days, than they were in the good days." And he turns to his wife and he says, "I want to ask you for a favor. Could we make a deal that no matter what and where life takes us, I will not me and not you, we both will not reveal our identity to anybody. Like this, I could always stay anonymous and study Torah peacefully, without being bothered." His wife must have been a really great woman to agree to this, because all he had to do was walk into any Jewish community and say, "He's the Taz," and they would have made him a rabbi right away, and he would have had a normal way to live. But she saw her husband wanted it so badly, she agreed. And like this, they lived a life of poverty. There's a lot of hardship along the way. And the peak of it all came one Thursday afternoon, when his wife came to him, crying, and she said, "I can't go on anymore." He said, "Why can't you go on anymore? What happened today? What's today different than yesterday?" And she tells him like this. She says, "It's Thursday afternoon. Tomorrow night is Shabbat, and I don't even have bread." So the Taz says, "This is not the first time we didn't have bread. But somehow we scraped together a little bit leftover, something from the bakery, and we survived." So So she says, but this week I'm embarrassed to walk out of the house to go to the bakery. I said, why? He said, because I needed food in the middle of the week, and I borrowed a few coins, some money from one of the neighbors, and I don't have the money to pay back. And I'm embarrassed to face the person, so I can't even go out of the house to go get the scrapes of bread that the baker would give me. And when the Taz heard that, he said if his wife is suffering so much, on one hand he didn't want to break his rule to reveal his identity, but on the other hand he wanted to provide her with money. So he said, I'm going to go get a job. But I'll go get a job in something that won't hurt my Torah. And he went and he got a job in the slaughterhouse. In Shechita, there are many other halachot. It's not just to slice the throat, to do Shechita. You have to check the animal, each animal's different, what you have to check, how you have to check. There are many, many halachot, what has to be done. So there are different people that work in a slaughterhouse. There's the shochet, but then there's somebody called a menakir, he does one job. And then certain people are the salters, they put the salt on the animals, on the chickens. And there's different jobs, different people have different roles. So he got one of the jobs. His job was one of the things you have to check in the animal. And they paid him whatever they paid him. And he came home that night, he had a couple of coins that they paid him. And he gave it to his wife, she was happy. And like this, during the day he would study. In the afternoon he would go for a few hours there, he would make a few coins, and that's the way they would survive. But when you slaughter animals, there are many halakha questions that arise all the time. Is it kosher? Is it not? Was the knife okay? Not okay? There are many, many, many complications. We take it for granted because we walk into the butcher and we have kosher meat and that's it. You don't know what went on until you got the kosher meat. And then you got to pray that when it's in the butcher it's actually kosher meat. But in the best case scenario, there's a lot of effort that went behind it. For example, us Sephardic Jews, we try, if possible, it's preferable, to buy meat that's Bet Yosef. We revealed a few weeks ago that the meat that they were selling us for years, telling us is Bet Yosef, was a sketch. It wasn't Bet Yosef. Because the person that was, not because somebody was trying to cheat, because the person that was checking the lungs of the animals and the parts of the animals to see if it's okay, if it's Bet Yosef or not, he didn't know what you have to check for at all. He was checking the wrong thing. And the majority of the meat that we thought was it was kosher. It wasn't kosher. But according to the Hidur of the Bet Yosef that Sephardic Jews try to follow, we just realized there's a big issue. It's not a joke, the majority of the meat. Now they changed the whole standard, thank God, in many places, and it got much better. But what I'm trying to bring out is that Shechita is very complicated. So you're constantly running to the rabbi. Is this okay? Is that okay? When the Taz got this job, they didn't know he was the Taz. But they saw that he was extremely knowledgeable in halakha. And suddenly there were no questions to go to the rabbi with. Because he knew what was okay and what wasn't okay. So they loved this guy. They gave him a raise. They wanted to keep him. They said, this is a gold mine. Saves us a headache. A couple of weeks later, the rabbi of the city sees nobody's coming with any questions. He says, look at it. The slaughterhouse 2 weeks is open. They didn't have one question on one chicken, one animal, one knife, nothing, not one in 2 weeks. I gotta go check what's going on. So he goes down to the slaughterhouse, surprise visit. The Chacham, yeah, welcome, Baruch haba, what'd you come for? He says, you used to send me 30 questions a day, now there's no questions, how could that be? So they said, listen, there's this strange guy, came to work for us, works a couple hours a day, gets a few coins, and he knows his stuff. So he right away could decide what's okay, what's not. So we felt, why should we bother the rabbi, waste his time? We'll take care of it ourselves and now we'll wait. And the rabbi gets very upset. And he says, I'm the rabbi of the city. And there's a halakha, more halakha b'fnei rabo. When there's a rabbi of a city, nobody else is allowed to say a halakha, even if he's a big rabbi. Shmuel HaNavi almost lost his life when he said a halakha in front of Eli HaKohen. And today we're very free and easy to say halachot. You don't realize there's a rabbi of the community, let him say the halakha, you stay out of it. But and he said, this guy is a more halakha b'fnei rabo. Who is he? So we don't know who he is. What's his name? We don't know. So he calls him. He says, what's your name? He says, David. David what? Doesn't make a difference. You don't have a last name? I forgot. How are you deciding what's going on over here? He says, I learned a little bit halachot to shechita. You could check if I'm okay, not okay. No big decisions, Rabbi. Rabbi gets upset, he calls the committee, then they would call the Shivat Uvei Ha'ir. He sits him down and he says, in the community here, we got a guy who works in the slaughterhouse who is a moreh halacha b'fnei rabo. And because of him, they're not coming to me with the questions, and I don't know, this could be a problem. We have to know how to deal with it. And the committee members sit together, and they discuss what to do, and they say, we got to punish this guy. He's out of control. So now, if there was the times of the Sanhedrin, he's chayav mitah bar minan, they would kill him. Never happened, but in theory. But 350 years ago, they didn't do such a thing. There's no death penalty anymore in the Jewish law. So this community had a different way of dealing with people that they thought weren't behaving properly. They had a room, which was called the room of the bad guy, the minudeh, the person that they have an issue with. And the punishment was, depending on the offense, that you had to sit in that room for a certain amount of time. But that room had a big open front window and everybody saw you. So it was a very humiliating thing. So they sat together, the committee, they decided this bad guy over here, 3 days he has to sit in that room. Fine. The Taz wasn't going to reveal his identity, right? That was his mission, so he accepted it. They wanted to, so what? And he sat there, and the kids were walking by making fun of him, and people were calling him names and saying, you lowlife, you're arguing on the rabbi, you should be embarrassed to yourself. And the worst things he was going through. Didn't say a word. On the third day that he was in there, he witnesses something. Sees a young girl coming into the synagogue with a pot. In the pot is a cooked chicken. And she goes into the rabbi's room, and she comes out 3 minutes later crying. So the Taz calls her over, and he asks her, why are you crying? So the girl tells him, my mother had this chicken that she cooked, and there was a halakha question if it's kosher or not. And she told me to go to the rabbi and ask him if it's kosher or not. And I went to the rabbi, and the rabbi looked at it, and he said it's not kosher. And we're very poor, this is our food for the whole week. So I'm crying, now we're not going to have food this week. And the Taz says, let me see the chicken. He looks at the chicken, and he sees that, it is kosher. And the rabbi doesn't know what he's talking about. But what's he going to do? He's already in a mess because he's being posek halachot. He was stuck, he was in a jam, he didn't know what to do. So he turns to the girl, and he tells her, go back to the rabbi and whisper in his ear that he should do you a big favor and look in a sefer called Turei Zahav, Taz, in Siman Lamed Daled, Seif Katan Gimel, and check again the halakha over there just in case. And she goes back into the rabbi, and the rabbi sees a girl crying with a chicken. He says, yeah, I already told you it's not good, what do you want? He says, Rabbi, can you do me a big favor? He says, what? Can you open up a sefer called Turei Zahav, Siman Lamed Daled, Seif Katan Gimel, and double check if maybe it is okay? The rabbi says, girl, I don't know, I'll check if you want, but he opens up the Turei Zahav, he learns the piece, and he says, yeah, it's okay. He says, wait a second, she's a 6-year-old girl, how does she know the Turei Zahav? So there was no Beit Yaakov yet. Today the girls know the halachot better than the boys, but then, so he tells her, who told you this? He says, Rabbi, I don't know, it's an interesting story. You know in that room where you put the troublemakers? So the troublemaker that was sitting there, he saw me crying, he called me over, he looked at the chicken, and he told me to tell you, but he didn't want it to come from him, so leave me out of this mess. The rabbi was an honest man. He realized, wait a second, here we're dealing with a Talmid Chacham, there's no joker. He knows the stuff better than me. So he calls him out of the room right away, brings the Shivat Tuvei Ha'ir, the people, the committee, and he turns to the guy, he says, what's your name? David. What's your last name? Doesn't make a difference. You got to tell me, I forgot. So the rabbi takes the committee and he says, together you all obey din together with me. We gozer on you b'gzerat Talmid Chacham, that you have to reveal to us who you are. And then at that point, it's dangerous not to do it. So he had no choice. He said, my name is David Segal. And when the rabbi heard the name David Segal, his face turned white, like a ghost. He said, you're the Taz? He said, yes. He starts crying. He says, Oy lanu ki chatanu, what did we do? We took the holiest man that exists, and look what we did to him. We destroyed him. Over what? Over pride that they didn't come to the rabbi, instead they went to him, or over nonsense. And over there they asked him mechila and this and that, they try to resolve the issue. So the Taz turned to them and he said like this, that you should know, al pi halacha, you don't have to ask me for forgiveness. Because everything you did was right. I was in your town, and I was moreh halacha b'fnei Rabbo, I did the wrong thing, and you had no reason to think that I'm a big Talmid Chacham, that you have to take me into consideration at all, because I didn't tell you who I was, and I on my own chose to hide my identity. And you see that even after you put me in that room and everything I went through, I still didn't want to tell you who I was, because for personal reasons I wanted to stay anonymous. Now that I had no choice, I revealed it, but you didn't know. So what you did, everything was right. You have nothing to ask me for forgiveness for. So the rabbi turns to the Taz and he tells him, okay, but say anyway that you forgive us. This is fine. He said out of his mouth, I forgive you. The rabbi calls the whole community, and in public he apologizes again to the Taz, and they escort him to where he was living, his temporary living, with great kavod, and this was the beginning of the Taz coming back up, both financially and in his rabbinic position. But before they went into the house, the rabbi turns to the Taz and asks him one more question. If you were so determined to hide your identity, why did you tell the girl what you told her? If you would have not told her, we would have never known that you're a Talmid Chacham. So he said like this, for many months, I heard a message from Borei Olam that said, hide your identity, because that's the way you can grow spiritually better. And it's better for you, even though it comes with suffering, and it comes with pain, and it comes with everything, it's better for you. But when I heard the tears of a young girl crying that she's not going to have what to eat, I heard from Borei Olam, don't be a tzaddik, a righteous person, on the account of a young girl, and reveal your identity, or risk revealing your identity. And at that point I went and I did what I did, even though it cost me that now my spiritual heights are no longer there. What the Taz really taught us is what he heard. One person hears a 6-year-old girl crying and he hears a nag. And the other person hears a 6-year-old girl crying and he hears a Jewish soul that's in pain. I know there's a big parenting discussion, and I'm not coming here to voice my opinion in parenting or whatever. I'm not a parenting specialist in any way, shape, or form. But when a baby cries at night, if to go to him or not to go to him, if to he has to learn to sleep. My mother used to tell me when I would run to my baby when he cried, you're going to raise a monster like that. Baruch Hashem, he doesn't have horns or big ears, everything's okay so far. I hope it continues that way. There's a big discussion. There are more modern, advanced psychologists today are beginning to admit that to let a baby cry does psychological damage to him later on in life, and it's not the best idea. But the old-fashioned way was definitely you put him into bed, goodbye, and see you in the morning. What you do in the middle of the night is not my problem. And if you cry too much, I get earplugs or noise cancellation headphones. This was the old way of doing things. Probably we were all raised like that, more or less. So one night, one of my kids was out of control. And every 10 minutes crying. And we would switch off, me and my wife, we'd sleep 10-minute segments. She would go, I would go back and forth. Finally, at like 3:30 or 4 in the morning, we were both breaking. And she turns to me and she says, maybe we should try the other way. Let him cry for half an hour. What's going to happen? This is out of control already, what he did tonight. And I told her, if you're asking a medical question or an education question, you might be right on both. I don't know. This is an argument. Whatever you say is right. But I want to tell you something. In just a few hours, or an hour was left, whatever it was, I'm going to get out of bed, I'm going to go to the synagogue to Slichot. It was during Elul. And I'm going to go and pray, Kamti Bashmoret Aboker, to pray, to cry to God, that He should listen to me, to my prayers and to my tears, and give me a good year. And I don't want God to look at me and say, you heard a Jewish kid crying, and said, I'm going to let him cry because I have to educate him. And Midah Keneged Midah say, I hear a Jewish kid crying, but I'm going to educate him. I want God to see, V'rachamav hakol ma'asav. Maybe the right thing is to let him cry. But the Midat HaRachamim doesn't let me let my son cry. Like this, when I cry to him, his Midat HaRachamim won't let me cry either. And that's why I don't care if I have to go 100 times tonight, I'll do it gladly b'simcha gdola. This is what I learned from the Taz. Do we hear the voice of a Jewish child that's crying? What do we hear? A nag? My son, he's crazy. What did he do to me last night? I didn't sleep all night. I can't work today. I'm in a bad mood. The world's coming to an end. I'm going to get you a night nurse. Or did we hear a neshama tehora crying? And at every age, people cry in different ways. Babies cry literally. As kids get a little bit older, it's below their ego to cry. So they begin acting up. We call it stupid behavior. It's not stupid behavior. It's a cry of a Jewish kid that he needs help. That's all it is. Sometimes you're in the synagogue and there's two guys in the back of the synagogue, don't stop talking. You're trying to pray, they're talking. You're trying to pray louder, they're talking even louder. You want to strangle them. Like, what'd you come to the synagogue for? Go outside, talk. And during Chazarat Hashat, it's really api halacha, we have to tell them that. There's no choice. The halacha says, during Chazarat Hashat, Goarimbo, you have to tell them, I'm sorry, you can't talk now. But when they're talking, they're not bad people. They're crying. That's what they're doing. It looks like they're talking, they're laughing, but really they're crying. They're crying and saying we're Jews, and we have so little of a connection to the Siddur that we can't even bring ourselves to pray. It bores us, so we sit and talk. That's what they're doing. They're shedding the biggest tear in the world. When you walk in Israel on the street in Shabbat in Tel Aviv, and sometimes there's a non-religious guy who sees you walking and you're with a big kippah and your talit, and he gives you a dirty look, he's not giving you a dirty look. Don't get insulted. He doesn't mean bad. He's a holy Jew. He's crying. I wish I would understand what you're doing. I don't understand. And his way of expressing it is by giving you a dirty look. And like this, every single step in life, that's the way it is. And the question is, Ma shmua shama uba. What do we really hear? And once we really hear finally, what did we do about it? And the truth is, we have to hear ourselves also. You know, sometimes we're so busy with the kiruv movement in quotations. We're trying to save the world, we forget to save ourselves. So I'm going to tell you what I said by my bar mitzvah. This was my speech. Chachamim teach us, kolam kayem nefesh achat miYisrael, ki'ilu kiyem olam maleh. Somebody who saves one Jewish soul, it's as if he saved the entire world. So I said then, and the Chachamim that were there agreed, that in my opinion, if you save yourself, that's also an olam maleh. That's a bigger olam than any other olam. And I pray to God that now that I'm chayav b'mitzvot, when I was 13, I should be able to save myself in every step of the way. That's an olam maleh. And every morning you cry to yourself when you're battling in bed. Should I get out of bed or not get out of bed? Twist this way out. So we're used to what they taught us in first grade, the Yetzirah, the Yetzirah Tov. Okay, that's good for a cute skit for the Morah to teach kids. When you get older, you have to understand it's a lot deeper. The Zohar says what happens is your neshama comes to you and starts crying. Get out of bed. I don't like the bed. I like the synagogue more. Take me there. And your body comes to you and is crying too. I'm tired. I'm weak. It's freezing outside. And the question is, which cry are you going to hear? If you hear the neshama's cry, you get out of bed. If you don't hear the neshama's cry, you stay in bed. That's it. That's what it narrows down to. Mashmu Hashama Uba. And he came. How do you know in the morning who heard the cry of the neshama, who didn't? Look who showed up and who didn't show up. And the one who didn't show up, now he has the next cry. As the Gemara says, Milayim Charata. He regrets that he didn't hear it. So it didn't even help him. So now he's up to the next step. I want to end off just with one little thought. I hope this is true. I don't. It's a remez. Not, of course, there's not pshat in Rashi, but a remez. Rashi's words were, Mashmu Hashama, what did he hear? Uba, and he came. So the word Uba is Vav, Bet, Aleph. Vav, the numerical value is 6, Bet is 2, is 8, Aleph is 9. 9 in the Torah is a very important number. Many numbers we have speeches about, but 9 you could go on for hours. But the thing that gives it the most importance is that the Chachamim teach us, Chatamo shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Emet. God's seal, His stamp on the world, is truth. God is the God of truth. Emet, Aleph is 1. Mem is 40, but in Gematriya there's a way to do it. You take zeros off. Zeros don't count. I wish in my bank they would do zeros, don't count, and add a few. Sadly, the bank is holik on this system. But in Gematria, there's a known thing like that. Mispar Katan, we take the zeros off. So instead of 40, 4. 1 and 4 is 5. Taf is 400. We got 2 zeros that we shed. The left, also with 4, is 9. So the Chochtamo, the seal of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in its simplicity, is the number 9, Emet. How do you know if a person's living a life of Emet or not? Uba. Did he come or did he not come? Did what he hear make a difference to him or did it not make a difference to him? Why is Chotamo Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu Emet? Why not 8? Why not 7? What about 6? Why they pick the number 9? So that the Chachamim many years ago teach us, I'm assuming most of you heard this already over the years, that 9, no matter what you'll do to the number, will always stay 9. 9 plus 9 equals 18. 1 and 8 is 9. 3 times 9 is 27. 2 and 7 is 9. And now work your way up, and you'll see no matter what you multiply 9 by, it'll always stay 9. Because truth lasts. Lies fade. Chotamo Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the seal of God on this world, is emet, is truth. Because that lasts forever. As we said 2 weeks ago, because God is on our side. The rest, the sheker in lo raglayim, that doesn't stand. It lasts a day, a week, a month, but the gimmicks don't last long. So our goal in life, our avodah, what we try to put a lot of effort into, is to hear. Is to hear God's message. Is to hear the words of the Chachamim. I think during Elul we once said, 2 people walk out of a class. I remember this from my days of sitting by the Mashgiach's class in the yeshiva in Lakewood. And sometimes this would happen to all of us. We'd walk out and turn to a friend and say, you heard how the rabbi spoke exactly what you had to hear tonight. Everything was the other guy. And sometimes we wanted to sound holy. So he would say, it was like a nevuah, like a prophecy, like a ruach hakodesh for you. What about for me? Not for me. Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld went into a synagogue and he heard the local rabbi of the small community speaking between Mincha and Arbit, giving a speech about the importance of learning Torah every day, even if it's a few minutes, just a couple of minutes. He started crying. And the rabbi saw Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld crying. He was scared that he's crying like this, Ama'aretz, what's he saying? So he went over to him after the speech and he said, Rabbi, I'm sorry if I said something that you didn't agree with or that made you cry. I feel terrible. You should have corrected me. And the rabbi says, no, I agreed with every word. That's why I was crying. I was crying when I realized I don't learn enough Torah. And this is Rabbi Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld, the chief rabbi, listening to some young guy giving a speech. He could have said, who's this kid at all? What's he saying? I'm here. He should have given me to speak. Rabbi Levine, a tzaddik in our time, sat once in a shiur Torah after Shacharit. I think it was actually Mishpatim. And he heard the rabbi speak about the importance of respecting your wife. And he gave a good speech on the subject. Shlom Bayit, how you have to behave, you have to act. And at the end of the class, Rabbi Levine walked over to the rabbi and he told him, I owe you a big akarat hatov. I learned a lot from you. That's exactly what I had to hear. Now, who's this Rabbi Levine? This is the same Rabbi Levine from the famous story that when his wife's foot hurt, went into Dr. Valach and Sharet Tzedek and told him, my wife's foot hurts me. The same man that had the best Shlom Bayit in the world, that every Shlom Bayit class until today uses his marriage as the role model of the perfect marriage, went to the young rabbi in the synagogue when he was towards the end of his life to tell him, I owe you a big akarat hatov, because what you said, me. You helped me a lot. You gave me good advice. Because Rabbi Levine heard. He heard under the words, between the words. He heard what Borei Olam sending a message. And we have to work on hearing. Everything in our life is a message. When you're stuck in traffic, there's a message. Somebody called me up a few hours ago, and that's why I was inspired to give this example. And he said, where are you? I said, I'm stuck in traffic. He said, we're on the Belt Parkway. I don't know if any of you drove on the Belt to here tonight, but there was a big accident. They closed the Belt for a while. Big accident. So he says, Rabbi, I was at the class this morning, and you said that everything that happens to you in life is a message. You're on the way to Shiur Torah. If you left early, you probably wanted to get there early. That was my plan. I figured I'd get to Queens early. I'll be able to go out to eat a little bit, get some food, relax, and then come here. Instead, I sat in the Belt Parkway, parked. What should we do? It's a shame there was no restaurant on the side. And I was parked like between the exits that there's nowhere to go also, like the worst. Let's get you. So he says, if you're stuck there's a message. What message did you take out of it? He stumped me a little bit. I told him, I'll tell you the truth, you gave me a big musar now. The first message I got is I didn't think about it. Let me hang up, I'll call you back soon. I hung up, and I decided, now I don't know if I was right, I'm not God, but I thought about it. So I decided that God's sending me a message that I didn't study enough Torah today, so He's going to leave me stuck in traffic, so instead of wasting time in a restaurant, I could listen to Shiur Torah. I took a CD I had in the car, I put it in to listen to Shiur Torah. I called him back at the end of the shiur, and he says, "No, Rabbi, you figured it out?" I said, "I called to share with you a chidush." So I told him a nice chidush. He says, "Where'd you get this chidush from? It's such a beautiful chidush. I'm going to use it by my table Friday night." I said, "I got it from you." He said, "You didn't get it from me. I never heard this chidush in my life." I said, "I know, but I was stuck in traffic, and God sent you to send me a message that over here there's a message. And the message I took out was to put in a CD, and this was the chidush I heard on the CD. So this is your Torah. You caused it. So here you go. I'm giving you back what you gave me. Thank you very much." In every little detail, there's a message. And our goal, our mission in life is ubah, is to live with a real emet and to see things objectively, not selectively, and in that merit to really grow. And just like the Torah has a parasha on his name, any one of us who tries to do that has a parasha on his name. He's a legacy of Am Yisrael. He is a parasha in the Torah. He's the Torah. He made the Torah himself. That's the greatest thing you can get to. May Borei Olam help. Kadosh Baruch Hu Yomad Dai L'Tzarotenu. By me this is in my blood. I'll never miss expressing this, especially when there are events. The events in Israel have unfolded in what for now is relatively calm, but can be very unpleasant, God forbid, with on the northern border. Even though the Israeli military is professionals at denying, but by now I don't think they could deny anymore. They had to go into Syria to bomb yesterday, and that normally escalates violence the way history has proved. But if we got to that point that our military is going in and out of the northern countries, Lebanon and Syria, that means our young kids that are standing now freezing in the Hermon are in danger. And that means we, as Jews, that love them, have to pray for them. They're doing our job. They're protecting the borders of Israel. These are holy kids, and their mothers are at home crying, not knowing if their kids are going to come home for Shabbat or not. So we have to feel that, and this just has to be part of us. And we should add in a prayer for these kids. That Borei Olam should protect all our soldiers, all Jewish soldiers in the world, and they should come home happy and healthy and safe to their mothers or to their wives. Or, each one's at a different step in life. That we shouldn't have to get into battles. We don't want to win wars in Israel. We don't want wars. We want quiet. We don't want to have the war. We don't want to win it. Nothing. It's like somebody says, "I survived cancer." You would have been a lot better off not having cancer in the first place. We won 7 wars. That's not a pride. It's a shame we had to get into 7 wars. Halavai, we should never have to get into another war. The next war should be Mashiach should fight for us. Go, get it over with 3 minutes, like the Gaon says, and goodbye. We don't want to have to deal with this. Besides, Chamavadia spoke at the beginning on Saturday night. I wasn't here since then, so I couldn't say it. But besides for those soldiers, there are other soldiers that are more important. The Hayaleh, Talmidei HaYeshivot, the units of the yeshivot in Israel that are also currently in danger because the law expired that allows them to sit and study Torah, and there are some news reporters that think they're politicians. They want to see the yeshiva students go to the army. They have issues. What should we do? If you want to understand what their issues are, there's a CD called An Army of Bnei Torah. Listen to that. We spoke about it in great detail. And this is a big tzara. And our Gdol Torah, Cham Ovadia, God should give him a long, healthy, happy life, said it once again that we should say for at least a few week period while the negotiations of this law is going on in Israel, Avinu Malkeinu and Shacharit every day, and like this most Sephardic communities around the world do, to pray for the Talmidei Yeshiva that God should protect them and they should be able to study Torah benachat and peacefully and happy to protect Am Yisrael. When a kid studies in Jerusalem Torah, he's not doing himself a favor. He's doing me a favor and you a favor. He's protecting all of us. His Torah makes the world a better place, and a happier place, and a richer place, and a healthier place. And then, this is in our mind non-stop. But we don't always hear it. It has to finally go in. The situation of Cholei Amo Beit Yisrael, the amount of sick people that Am Yisrael has, is traumatic. There's no end. You go into any hospital over here in New York City and see how many Jews are there. You won't believe what you're seeing. You'll say, wait a second, are the Jews the majority of the population? No, we're not. It's very, very scary. And so the Gemara says, before we start praying for cholim that they should get better, which it's a big mitzvah and we should always do, we should pray that we should stay healthy, that we should never be cholim that have to be prayed for. That's preventive measures. And especially in days like this that we see clearly, so you should have a heart and an ear when you say the words Rifa'enu in the prayers. Number one, for Cholei Amo Beit Yisrael, but mainly for yourself. Borei Olam, thank God I'm healthy, everything's okay with me. Keep it that way. I always want to be healthy. I don't want issues. I don't have to go running to doctors. I don't want to have to go this one, that one, this situation, this pressure, that pressure. We don't need this. And for those who are sick, and they're plenty. They're plenty. The amount that I know myself is frightening. And some of them are very, very critically sick. Very, 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 very critically ill. Borei Olam should send them a refuah shlema b'mhera. Toch shar Cholei Amo Beit Yisrael. And as we always end off, we should be zocheh to all the berachot of the Torah, and mainly va'avarecha mevarachecha. Those who bless us and want to know good and say good about us should be blessed. Umekalelcha aor. And those who try to give us a hard time and cause us problems and talk bad about us, Borei Olam should resolve the issues, that we shouldn't have issues. Be'ezrat Hashem. Bekarov nivashav Yerushalayim el hakodesh me'ah ve'amenu, amen v'amen.